The leather stung Katherine Thompson's fingers as she pulled the thick needle through worn hide, her eyes burning from another 12-hour day. But stopping meant not eating, and she had learned 3 years ago that hunger was far worse than any pain her hands could endure. The back room of Porter's General Store in Ouray, Colorado smelled of dust and old tobacco, a cramped space barely wide enough for her workbench, and the pile of damaged saddles customers brought in. It was 1883, and the silver mining boom had filled the mountain town with prospectors and cowboys who rode their horses hard and treated their equipment worse. That meant steady work for Katherine, though steady did not mean profitable. She earned 15 cents per saddle repair, 25 if the work was extensive, and most days she managed to complete 3 if she pushed herself past exhaustion. Her father had taught her leather work before the consumption took him 2 winters back. Her mother had followed him 6 months later, leaving Katherine alone at 19 with nothing but skilled hands and a determination that burned hotter than the small stove in her rented room above the milliner's shop. She had sold everything else, every stick of furniture, every dish, every memento, just to keep herself fed and housed through that first terrible year. Now, at 22, she had achieved a sort of grim stability. She worked, she ate sparingly, she slept, and then she worked again. The other young women in Ouray attended socials and church gatherings, flirted with miners and shop clerks, planned futures that included husbands and homes. Katherine kept her head down and her needle moving. Romance was a luxury for women with dowries and prospects, not for those who lived on pennies and pride. The bell above the store's front door chimed, and she heard Mr. Porter's jovial greeting. Katherine did not look up. Customers rarely concerned her unless they had damaged leather goods, and she had 3 saddles still waiting for her attention. Her fingers moved mechanically, the familiar rhythm of pierce, pull, tighten, something she could do half asleep. She had done it half asleep more than once, waking at her bench with a completed repair and no memory of finishing it. "Got somebody asking about custom work," Mr. Porter called from the front. "Says his saddle's beyond fixing." Katherine set down her current project and wiped her hands on her already stained apron. Custom work paid better, sometimes as much as $1 if the customer was flush with mining money and did not haggle. She pushed through the curtain that separated her workspace from the main store and stopped short. The man standing at the counter was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of weathered bronze. Trail dust covered his clothes, and he held a saddle that had clearly seen better days, the leather cracked and splitting along the pommel, the stirrup straps nearly worn through. But it was not the damaged equipment that caught Katherine's attention. It was the way he looked at her, direct and assessing but not unkind, as though he actually saw her rather than looking through her the way most men did. "Madam," he said, his voice rough with either disuse or the dry Colorado air. "Name's Lucas Harper. I need a saddle that will last more than a season. Porter here says you do quality work." Katherine moved closer, examining the wreck he had brought. "This one's done," she said flatly. "Leather's rotted through in places. I could patch it, but you would be better off buying new." "Can't afford new," Lucas said. "Not the quality I need, anyway. The ready-made ones they sell fall apart after hard riding. I need something built to take punishment." She looked up at him, studying his face properly now. He was young, probably close to her own age, but his eyes held the kind of weariness that came from too many long days in the saddle. A working cowboy, then, not a prospector trying his luck in the mines. "I have never built a saddle from scratch," she admitted. "Only repairs, but you know how." "I know the theory. My father was a saddle maker. I watched him work for years before he died." Lucas set the ruined saddle on the counter between them. "I'll pay you $5 if you can make me something that will hold up to 8 hours a day of hard-range riding. Good leather, double-stitched, reinforced stirrup straps. I need it done in 2 weeks. $5. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. $5 was more than she made in a month of repairs. It was new boots to replace the ones with holes in the soles. It was a winter coat that actually kept out the cold. It was the difference between scraping by and having a small cushion against disaster. "Why not go to a proper saddle shop?" she asked, suspicion making her cautious. Men did not offer that kind of money without a reason, and in her experience, reasons usually came with conditions she could not accept. "Nearest proper saddle maker is in Montrose, 2 days' ride from here," Lucas said. "And he wants $8 and a month's wait. I start a new job in 3 weeks running cattle up near Ridgway. I need equipment before then." The explanation made sense, but Katherine still hesitated. "I have never made a complete saddle," she repeated. "I do not want to take your money and deliver something that falls apart." "Porter says you are the most careful craftsman he has seen," Lucas said. "Says you take twice as long as you need to on repairs because you insist on doing it right. That's what I need. Someone who takes pride in the work." She looked at Mr. Porter, who nodded confirmation. "It's true, Miss Thompson. Your work is always solid. Better than that hack in Montrose, if you ask me. He rushes through jobs and charges too much." Katherine turned back to Lucas, weighing the risk. If she failed, she would lose whatever materials she purchased, and worse, she would damage her reputation. But if she succeeded, $5 would change everything. "I will need money upfront for materials," she said carefully. "Good leather costs." Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. He counted out $3 onto the counter. "Half now, half on delivery. If the saddle's not what I need, you keep $1 for your time and materials, and we call it square." It was more than fair. Katherine picked up the coins, feeling their weight in her palm. 2 weeks, she said. "I will need you to come back in 3 days for a fitting. I have to build the tree to match your size and riding style." "I'll be here," Lucas promised. His hand brushed hers as she gathered the coins, and Katherine felt an unexpected jolt of warmth at the contact. She pulled back quickly, tucking the money into her apron pocket. 3 days, she repeated, then retreated to her workroom before he could say anything else. Through the curtain, she heard him exchange a few more words with Mr. Porter, then the door chimed as he left. Katherine leaned against her workbench, her heart still racing. She had just committed to the most ambitious project of her life, and suddenly the enormity of it crashed over her. Building a saddle from scratch required skills she had only observed, never practiced. If she made a mistake, cut the leather wrong, assembled the tree incorrectly, she would waste the materials and fail to deliver. But she had promised, and Katherine Thompson did not break her word. She spent the rest of that day finishing her pending repairs with unusual speed, her mind already racing ahead to the new project. That evening, after Mr. Porter closed the store, she walked to the leatherworker's supply shop near the edge of town and spent nearly $2 of her $3 on the finest leather she could afford. The remainder went to hardware, metal rings and buckles that would not rust or break under stress. Back in her small room, she spread her father's old pattern notes across her narrow bed. He had written detailed instructions for saddle construction, complete with diagrams and measurements. Katherine had read them a dozen times over the years, memorizing the process even though she never expected to use it. Now she studied them with fierce concentration, comparing different designs, considering what would work best for a working cowboy who spent long days in the saddle. Sleep came late and fitfully. She dreamed of leather and stitching, of her father's patient hands guiding hers through a difficult seam. When she woke before dawn, her fingers were already curled as though holding a needle. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of concentrated work. She completed her repair jobs in record time, then spent every spare moment on Lucas Harper's saddle. The tree came first, built from carefully shaped wood pieces that formed the saddle's frame. She worked slowly, measuring 3 times before each cut, testing the fit constantly against the measurements she had estimated from his build. When Lucas returned on the 3rd day, she had a rough mock-up ready for fitting. He came in the late afternoon when the store was quiet and Mr. Porter was restocking shelves in the back. "It is not finished," Katherine said quickly as Lucas examined the bare frame, "but I need to make sure the size is right before I do the final assembly." "Where do you want me?" he asked. She had borrowed a wooden horse from the stable down the street, an old mounting practice tool that would serve for the fitting. "Sit like you would normally ride," she instructed. Lucas settled onto the mock-up with easy grace, and Katherine moved around him with professional focus, checking angles and positions. But she could not help noticing details that had nothing to do with the saddle. The way his hands rested naturally on the pommel, confident and capable. The breadth of his shoulders, the fact that he smelled like sage and horse and clean sweat, not unpleasant but entirely masculine. "You have done this before," he said as she adjusted one of the stirrup positions. "Only on my father's saddles, years ago, never on my own. You are good at it." "Careful." Katherine felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. She was not used to praise, certainly not from handsome cowboys who looked at her like she was worth seeing. "The seat needs to be an inch deeper," she said, keeping her voice level. "And I am going to reinforce this section here where the saddle bags would attach. Heavy use will stress it." "How did you end up doing this?" Lucas asked. "It is unusual work for a woman." "It is the work I know," Katherine said simply. "After my parents died, it was this or find a husband, and I was not inclined toward the latter." "No one caught your eye." She moved around to check the other stirrup, avoiding his gaze. "I have no dowry and no prospects. The men in our array are looking for wives who bring land or money or connections. I bring skill with a needle and barely enough income to feed myself. Seems to me that skill with a needle is worth more than land that could wash away in a flood or money that could be spent," Lucas said quietly. Katherine looked up at him then, startled by the seriousness in his tone. "That is a romantic notion," she said, "but it does not put food on the table or a roof overhead. Neither does a worthless husband." Despite herself, Katherine smiled. "True enough." She finished the fitting, making careful notes of the adjustments needed. As Lucas dismounted from the practice horse, she said, "Another week and it will be ready. I am double stitching everything and treating the leather to resist water damage." "Take the full 2 weeks if you need them," Lucas said. "I would rather have it done right than done fast." After he left, Katherine returned to her workroom with a strange lightness in her chest. The conversation had been brief, professional, nothing inappropriate or forward. But there had been something in the way Lucas spoke to her, a respect and directness that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced since her father died. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the work. The saddle consumed her over the following days. She hand-stitched every seam with wax thread, her fingers developing new calluses despite their existing toughness. She carved designs into the leather around the cantle, nothing fancy but enough to mark it as custom work. She treated every surface with oil and sealant, building up layers of protection against weather and wear. Mr. Porter commented on her dedication. "I have never seen you so focused," he said one afternoon, bringing her a cup of weak coffee. "This cowboy must be paying well." "He is paying fairly," Katherine corrected, "and I want to do the job right." "He has been back twice since the fitting," Porter added casually. "Asked about you both times, wanted to know if you needed anything, if the materials were adequate." Katherine kept her eyes on her stitching. "He is concerned about his investment." "Maybe," Porter said, but his tone suggested he thought otherwise. On the 12th day, Katherine completed the saddle. She stayed up most of the night doing the final treatments, buffing the leather until it glowed deep brown in the lamplight. When she finally stepped back to examine the finished piece, exhaustion and satisfaction warred within her. It was beautiful. It was solid. It was the best work she had ever done. The next morning, she sent word through Porter that the saddle was ready. Lucas arrived within an hour, as though he had been waiting nearby for the message. Katherine brought the finished saddle out to the main store, setting it carefully on the counter. For a long moment, Lucas said nothing. He ran his hands over the leather, checking the stitching, testing the stirrups, examining every detail with the thoroughness of someone who knew exactly what to look for. Katherine's heart hammered as she waited for his verdict. "This is exceptional work," he said finally, and the warmth in his voice made her knees feel weak. "Better than anything I have seen, including from that fancy saddle maker in Montrose." "It will hold up to hard use," Katherine said, relief making her almost dizzy. "I reinforced all the stress points and treated it for weather resistance. The leather should soften with use but not weaken." Lucas pulled out his coin pouch and counted the remaining $2 onto the counter. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added a third. "For work that exceeds the contract," he said when she started to protest, $6 total." Katherine stared at the coins, almost unable to process that much money at once. "That is too much," she managed. "It is what the work is worth," Lucas said firmly. He picked up the saddle, testing its weight. "I ride out tomorrow morning for the job up near Ridgway. I will be back in 3 months when the cattle drive finishes. If this saddle holds up the way I think it will, I want to commission another piece. Saddle bags, maybe, chaps." "You interested in more work?" "Yes," Katherine said immediately. 3 months seemed impossibly far away, but the promise of future work and future income was too valuable to dismiss. "I will be here." "Good." Lucas shifted the saddle to rest more comfortably in his arms. "Thank you, Miss Thompson, for taking a chance on a job you had never done before." "Thank you for giving me the opportunity," Katherine replied. He nodded and headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If I wrote to you while I am away, would you write back? I do not know many people in these parts yet, and it would be good to have friendly correspondence." Katherine's breath caught. Letter writing was personal, more intimate than business dealings. A step towards something she had convinced herself she did not want or need, but she found herself nodding before she could overthink it. "I would like that," she said softly. Lucas smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered face and made him look younger, less burdened. "Good. I will send a letter as soon as I am settled in the range camp." Then he was gone, the door chiming behind him, leaving Katherine alone with $6 silver and a strange flutter in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. The first letter arrived 3 weeks later, delivered by the twice-monthly mail coach. Mr. Porter handed it to Katherine with a knowing look that she ignored. She waited until she was back in her room that evening before opening it, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the plain paper. Lucas wrote simply and directly, describing the cattle operation near Ridgway, the harsh beauty of the high country, the challenges of keeping several hundred head of cattle under control with only a small crew. He mentioned the saddle, reporting that it was holding up perfectly despite hard daily use, and that the other cowboys had commented on its quality. The letter was not flowery or romantic, but something in its straightforward honesty touched Katherine more than poetry would have. She wrote back that same night, telling him about her ongoing repair work, about the early snow that had hit our array the previous week, about a funny incident involving Mr. Porter and a confused prospector who thought the general store sold mining claims. She kept her tone light, but added a few personal details. How she had finally bought new boots with his payment, how she had been practicing more advanced leatherwork techniques in preparation for his return. The correspondence continued through the autumn months, letters arriving every 2 or 3 weeks depending on how often someone rode between Ridgway and our array. Katherine found herself waiting for those letters with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. She had spent 3 years building walls around herself, focusing on survival rather than connection. But Lucas's letters slipped through those defenses with gentle persistence. He told her about his past, how he had worked ranches across Colorado and Wyoming since he was 16, how he had lost his own parents to a prairie fire when he was 14 and had been on his own ever since. He wrote about his dreams of someday owning a small ranch, nothing fancy, but enough land to run a modest herd and build a stable life. He asked about her dreams, and Katherine found herself admitting things she had barely acknowledged to herself. That she wanted to expand beyond repairs to creating fine leather goods, that she hoped someday to have her own shop rather than working in Porter's back room, that she missed having family and connections more than she let herself think about. As the weeks passed, the letters grew longer and more personal. Lucas wrote about his loneliness on the range, about sitting watch under star-filled skies and thinking about their conversations. Katherine admitted that she looked forward to his letters more than anything else in her routine days. Neither of them said the word that hovered between the lines of their correspondence, but Katherine felt it growing in her heart with each passing week: love. She was falling in love with a cowboy she had met only twice, through words on paper and the memory of bronze eyes that saw her as more than a struggling craftswoman scraping by on pennies. It terrified her. It exhilarated her. It made her feel alive in a way she had forgotten was possible. December brought bitter cold and heavy snow to the mountains. Katherine worked through the short days with chapped hands and a drafty room, but Lucas's letters kept her warm in ways the small stove never could. His latest correspondence mentioned that the cattle drive was ahead of schedule and would likely finish by mid-December rather than late January. He would be back in our array by Christmas, he wrote, and he hoped she would allow him to call on her properly once he returned. Katherine read that line a dozen times, her heart racing. Calling on her properly meant courtship, meant intentions beyond friendship, meant everything was about to change. She wrote back immediately, saying yes, she would very much like that, trying to keep her words calm and measured even though her hands shook with emotion as she formed the letters. The reply came faster than usual, as though Lucas had sent it the moment he received her acceptance. His next letter was different from the others, more open, more vulnerable. He wrote that he had been thinking about her since the day he met her, that her skill and determination had impressed him first, but her spirit and strength had captured something deeper. He had not wanted to presume or push too fast, so he had kept his feelings contained in the letters. But now, knowing she welcomed his courtship, he wanted her to understand that his intentions were serious. He was not looking for a casual flirtation or passing companionship. He was looking for a partner, for someone to build a life with, and he believed Katherine might be that person if she felt the same. Katherine sat on her narrow bed, the letter clutched in her hands, and let herself cry for the first time in 3 years. not from sadness but from overwhelming relief and joy. She had been so alone for so long, carrying everything by herself, never allowing herself to hope for more. Now here was Lucas Harper, offering her exactly what she had not dared to dream about: partnership, respect, love. She wrote back that night, pouring her heart onto the page in a way she had never done before. She told him about the loneliness, about the fear that she would spend her life alone because she had nothing to offer a husband except skill with her hands and a stubborn refusal to give up. She told him that his letters had become the brightest part of her days, that she thought about him constantly, that she had been falling in love with him through his words, and was eager to see if the feeling held true when they were face to face again. After she sealed that letter, Katherine felt lighter than she had in years. The future, which had always seemed like nothing but an endless succession of days working for Pennies, suddenly held possibility and promise. Lucas returned to our array on December 20th, riding into town on a cold afternoon with snow threatening in the heavy gray clouds. Katherine was working in her back room when she heard Mr. Porter call out a greeting, followed by a familiar voice asking if Miss Thompson was available. She set down her needle carefully, wiped her hands on her apron, and pushed through the curtain with her heart hammering so hard she felt dizzy. Lucas stood just inside the door, trail worn and dusty, but smiling at her with such warmth that Katherine forgot to breathe for a moment. He looked exactly as she remembered, and somehow better, more solid and real than memory had held. "Miss Thompson," he said softly. "Mr. Harper," she replied, acutely aware that Mr. Porter was watching with barely concealed interest. "I wondered if you might be available for dinner this evening," Lucas said. "There is a decent restaurant near the hotel, nothing fancy but the food is good, and I would very much like to continue our conversation in person." Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice. She managed to say, "7 o'clock. I will call for you at 7, Lucas agreed. He gave her another of those warm smiles, tipped his hat to Mr. Porter, and left. As soon as the door closed, Porter let out a low whistle. "That is a man with intentions," he said. "About time you had something good happen, Miss Thompson." Katherine could not disagree. That evening she dressed in her only good dress, a simple dark blue wool that had been her mother's. It was years out of fashion and showed signs of careful mending, but it was clean and presentable. She brushed her long brown hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully, allowing a few soft tendrils to frame her face. When she looked in her small mirror, she barely recognized herself. For 3 years, she had been too tired and stressed to care about her appearance beyond basic cleanliness. Now, preparing to see Lucas, she took the time to look like a young woman going courting, not a worn-down craftswoman grinding through another day. Lucas arrived precisely at 7, dressed in clean clothes that looked new, his hair freshly cut and his face shaved smooth. He stared at Katherine for a long moment when she opened her door, and she saw something deep and warm kindle in his bronze eyes. "You are beautiful," he said simply. Katherine felt her cheeks heat. "You clean up well yourself." He offered his arm and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his coat. They walked through the cold streets to the restaurant, making small talk about the weather and the town, both of them dancing around the deeper current that flowed between them. The restaurant was half full with miners and merchants finishing their evening meals. Lucas secured a table near the back, away from the loudest conversations, and helped Katherine with her chair before sitting across from her. In the lamplight, she could see new lines around his eyes, the mark of 3 months squinting against sun and weather. "The saddle held up," he said once they had ordered. "Not a single problem. The other cowboys were so impressed that 2 of them asked where I got it. I gave them your name." "Thank you," Katherine said. "I could use the work. How have things been? Beyond what you wrote in the letters, she considered the question. Steady. Porter has been good about sending repair work my way, and I have been building up a small savings. Not much, but more than I have ever had before. Your commission made a real difference. I am glad. Lucas leaned forward slightly. Katherine, I want to be direct with you because I think we have both spent enough time in our letters to know where this might be heading. I made good money on the cattle drive, and I have a job offer for the spring managing a smaller operation outside town. It is steady work with a real salary, not just seasonal contracts. I will be able to settle somewhere permanent instead of drifting from job to job. Katherine's heart picked up speed. That sounds like a good opportunity. It is, and I am hoping that you might consider building a future with me. He reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, a working man's hand that matched her own worn fingers. I have thought about nothing but you for 3 months. Your letters, your spirit, the way you took on a job you had never done before just because you needed the work and were not afraid of trying. That is the kind of woman I want beside me, someone strong and skilled and determined. I have thought about you constantly as well, Katherine admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Your letters were the only thing that kept me going through some hard days. But Lucas, I have to be honest. I do not know how to be a wife. I have spent 3 years learning how to survive alone. I do not know if I can be what you need. You already are, he said firmly. I am not looking for someone to keep house and cook meals, though those things are nice. I am looking for a partner. Someone who works as hard as I do, who understands what it takes to build something from nothing. We could do that together. I could manage cattle, you could build your leather goods business. We could support each other instead of struggling alone. It made sense. More than that, it made Katherine's chest ache with longing. The idea of partnership, of not being alone anymore, of having someone to share burdens and dreams with, it was almost too much to hope for. What if it does not work? She asked quietly. What if we are good at letters but cannot manage living together? Then we figure it out, Lucas said. We both survived things that should have broken us. We can handle the challenges that come with building a life together. He squeezed her hand gently. I am not asking you to decide tonight. I am asking you to give this a real chance. Let me court you properly. Let us spend time together and see if what we have in letters translates to real life. Katherine looked at their joined hands, his tanned fingers wrapped around her paler, work-roughened ones. It felt right. It felt like something she had been missing without knowing it. All right, she said. Yes, court me properly, Lucas Harper, and we will see where it leads. His smile was brilliant, transforming his serious face into something younger and more carefree. That is all I ask. They talked through the rest of dinner, conversation flowing as easily as it had in their letters. Lucas told her more about the cattle operation he would be managing, how he would have a small cabin on the property and a decent salary that would allow him to start saving toward his dream of owning land. Katherine described her hopes of expanding beyond repairs, of creating fine leather goods that could be sold not just in our array but in the larger towns down the mountain. When Lucas walked her home through the cold streets, snow beginning to fall in soft white flakes, he did not try to kiss her. Instead, he took her hand at her door and said, "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Katherine Thompson." "Thank you for seeing me when I thought I was invisible," she replied. She watched him walk away through the falling snow, then went inside and sat on her bed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. For the first time in 3 years, the future looked like something more than mere survival. Lucas called on her 3 times over the next week. They walked through town despite the cold, talking about everything and nothing. They attended a Christmas Eve service at the small church, sitting side by side while candles flickered and the congregation sang familiar hymns. Katherine felt the warmth of Lucas's presence beside her and thought about how different this Christmas was from the previous three, when she had spent the holiday alone in her cold room with nothing but work to fill the empty hours. On Christmas Day, Lucas brought her a present, a beautiful leather journal with her initials tooled into the cover. "I had it made in Montrose," he said as she traced the letters with wonder. "I thought you might like to have something fine, something that was not just for work." Katherine had made him a gift as well, working on it late at night after her regular jobs were finished. It was a belt, hand-tooled with a pattern of mountains and horses, the buckle made from carefully worked silver she had traded for with the jeweler down the street. Lucas held it like it was precious, running his fingers over the intricate design. "This must have taken hours," he said quietly. "It did," Katherine admitted, "but I wanted to make you something special. You gave me hope again, Lucas. That is worth more than any amount of time." He looked at her with such intensity that Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Lucas cupped her face gently in his calloused hands and kissed her softly, carefully, as though she were something precious. Katherine's first kiss, at 22 years old, in a cold room above a milliner's shop on Christmas Day. It was perfect. When they broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, but we have been building toward this for months. I love you, Katherine. I want to wake up beside you every morning and build a life with you. Say yes." Katherine should have been frightened by the speed of it, by the enormous change he was proposing. But she had learned over the past 3 years that life was unpredictable and often harsh, that opportunities had to be seized when they appeared because they might not come again. And she loved him. She loved his steadiness, his respect, his understanding of what it meant to work hard for every small victory. She loved the way he saw her as an equal partner rather than someone to be protected or controlled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Lucas kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms wrapping around her and pulling her close. Katherine melted into the embrace, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had not experienced since her parents died. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church, with Mr. Porter and his wife as witnesses. Katherine wore a new dress Lucas had insisted on buying, a soft gray wool that made her eyes look bright and clear. Lucas wore his best clothes and held her hand through the vows as though he would never let go. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration at the hotel restaurant, just the 4 of them eating good food and toasting the future. Mrs. Porter cried happy tears and declared it the most romantic thing she had ever seen, a cowboy and a craftswoman finding love over a saddle. Mr. Porter gave Katherine a generous bonus and said her job would be waiting whenever she wanted to come back to it. Lucas had rented a small house on the outskirts of Auray, a 2-room cabin with a wood stove and real glass windows. It was not much, but to Katherine, who had lived in a single cramped room for 3 years, it felt like a palace. Lucas carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. "It is not much yet," he said, looking around at the sparse furnishings he had managed to acquire, "but we will make it home." Katherine turned in a slow circle, taking in the space that was now theirs. A real bed, not a narrow cot, a table and chairs, a rocking chair by the stove. "It is perfect," she said, meaning it. That night, they consummated their marriage with gentle care, learning each other's bodies with patience and growing passion. Katherine had been nervous, innocent of physical intimacy, but Lucas was kind and thorough, making sure she felt pleasure before taking his own. Afterward, lying in his arms in their marriage bed, Katherine felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Lucas replied, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "You took a chance on me first," Katherine reminded him, "trusting me with that saddle when I had never built one before." "Best decision I ever made," Lucas said. "It brought me you." The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Lucas worked at the ranch during the day, managing the winter feeding operations, while Katherine continued her leather work from home. She converted part of their cabin into a proper workshop, and Lucas built her a real workbench with storage for her tools and materials. Word of her skills spread through town, and soon she had more repair work than she could handle, plus inquiries about custom pieces. In February, one of the cowboys Lucas had told about her work rode all the way from Ridgway to commission a saddle. Then another came from Montrose. By March, Katherine had a waiting list and was able to raise her prices. She hired a young woman from town to help with the simpler repairs, teaching her the basics of leatherwork the way Katherine's father had taught her. Lucas watched her business grow with obvious pride. "You are going to need a real shop soon," he said one evening as they sat by the fire, Katherine working on detailed tooling while Lucas repaired tack for the ranch. "Maybe someday," Katherine said. "For now, this works. I like being home when you come back each evening." "I like that too," Lucas admitted. He set aside the bridle he was mending and moved to sit beside her on the floor. "Katherine, I have been thinking about something." She looked up from her work, hearing the serious note in his voice. "What is it?" "The ranch owner offered me a permanent position as foreman with a significant salary increase. But there is a condition. He wants me to take on more responsibility, which means longer hours and sometimes being away for days at a time during spring and fall when we are moving cattle to different pastures." Katherine set down her tools, giving him her full attention. "What do you want to do?" "The money would be excellent," Lucas said carefully. "It would mean we could save much faster toward buying our own land, but it would also mean less time together, at least during the busy seasons. I will not take it if you are not comfortable with the arrangement." She considered it thoughtfully. 3 months ago, the idea of Lucas being away for days would have worried her, made her feel insecure in their new marriage. But they had built something solid in their short time together, a foundation of trust and mutual support that could withstand temporary separations. "Take it," she said firmly. "We are both working toward the same goal. A few years of long hours and extra effort now means we will have our own place sooner. We can handle being apart sometimes." Lucas pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly. "Have I mentioned lately that you are remarkable?" "Not in at least an hour," Katherine teased, kissing him back. He took the foreman position, and their lives settled into a new rhythm. During the winter months, Lucas was home most evenings. Spring and fall meant longer days and occasional nights away, but he always came home to her, and they made the most of their time together. Katherine's business continued to grow, her reputation spreading through the mountain communities. She became known for quality work and fair prices, and her custom saddles developed a following among working cowboys who needed equipment that could take punishment. In late summer, Katherine realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. The realization brought both excitement and fear. She and Lucas had talked about children, but always in vague future terms, not as an immediate reality. Now, feeling the subtle changes in her body, Katherine had to face the fact that their family was about to grow. She waited until she was certain before telling Lucas. He had just returned from a week-long trip moving cattle to high summer pasture, tired and covered in trail dust. Katherine let him wash up and eat before she pulled him to sit beside her on their bed. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hands in hers. Lucas's expression shifted to concern. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, at least I do not think so." Katherine took a deep breath. "Lucas, I am with child. The baby should come in late winter or early spring." For a moment, Lucas simply stared at her. Then his face broke into the most brilliant smile she had ever seen. He let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are going to be parents," he said, setting her down and cupping her face in his hands. "Katherine, that is the most wonderful news." "You are happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "I am beyond happy," Lucas assured her. "I am already imagining teaching our son to ride." "What if it is a daughter?" Katherine challenged. "Then I will teach her to ride and also how to throw a punch in case any fool tries to take advantage," Lucas said firmly. "Our daughter will be as strong and capable as her mother." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I am scared," she admitted. "My mother died, Lucas." "What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong," he said fiercely. "We will get the best doctor and I will be right there with you. You are the strongest person I know, Katherine. You will be fine and our baby will be fine." She wanted to believe him, wanted to push away the fear that had lived in her since she realized her condition. But childbirth was dangerous, especially in a mountain town far from sophisticated medical care. Women died, even healthy women with attentive husbands and good doctors. Lucas seemed to sense her continued worry. "Look at me," he said gently, waiting until she met his eyes. "You survived losing your parents at 19. You built a business from nothing, working harder than most men I know. You took on challenges that terrified you because you refused to give up. This is just one more challenge and you will face it the same way you faced all the others, with courage and determination." His confidence steadied her. Katherine nodded, pushing down the fear. "You are right, I am being silly." "You are being human," Lucas corrected. "But you are also strong enough to handle this. We both are." The pregnancy progressed without major complications. Katherine worked as long as she could, finally handing most of her business over to her assistant when she became too large and tired to manage the detailed work. Lucas reduced his hours, arranging with the ranch owner to stay closer to home as Katherine's time approached. In early March, during a late winter storm that dumped 2 feet of snow on our array, Katherine went into labor. The doctor barely made it to their cabin through the drifts, arriving just in time for the hard work to begin. Lucas stayed with her throughout, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when Katherine was sure she could not endure another moment of pain. After 14 hours of labor, as dawn broke over snow-covered mountains, Katherine delivered a healthy baby boy. The doctor placed the squalling infant in her arms, and Katherine looked down at the tiny red face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "We have a son," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Lucas knelt beside the bed, staring at the baby with awe. "He is perfect," he said hoarsely. "He looks like you." "He has your nose," Katherine countered, tracing the tiny features with one gentle finger. They named him James, after Katherine's father. Little Jamie proved to be a healthy, hungry baby with powerful lungs and his father's bronze-colored eyes. Lucas was besotted, spending every spare moment holding his son and talking to him about cattle and horses, and all the things they would do together when Jamie was older. Katherine recovered quickly from the birth, her years of physical labor having built the strength she needed. By late spring, she was back to doing lighter leather work, Jamie sleeping in a cradle beside her workbench. Her assistant had managed the business well during Katherine's confinement, and together they had built up an impressive backlog of orders. Life settled into a new rhythm that included the demands and joys of parenthood. Lucas took on even more responsibility at the ranch, his reputation as a skilled foreman spreading. By Jamie's first birthday, they had saved enough money to start seriously looking at property. They found a small ranch about 5 miles from our 40 acres with good water and a decent cabin. It needed work. The fences were falling down and the barn needed a new roof, but the price was reasonable and the land was good. Lucas and Katherine stood on a hill overlooking the property. Jamie balanced on Lucas's hip and looked at what could be their future. "We could make this work," Lucas said quietly. "Run a modest herd, maybe 50 head to start. You could have a proper workshop, and there is enough room to expand if your business keeps growing." Katherine looked at the land, the mountains rising blue and majestic in the distance, and felt a sense of rightness settle over her. "Let us do it," she said. "Let us build something that is truly ours." They bought the ranch in the spring of 1886, 3 years after Lucas had walked into Porter's store with a ruined saddle and changed Katherine's life forever. The first year was hard, filled with back-breaking work to get the property functional. They repaired fences, rebuilt the barn, expanded the cabin to include a proper workshop for Katherine and more living space for their growing family. Lucas took on additional work to supplement their income while building up their herd gradually, buying quality cattle that would form the foundation of their breeding program. Katherine's leatherwork business thrived. She hired 2 more assistants, teaching them her techniques and standards. Her custom saddles became sought after, commanding prices that reflected their quality. She expanded into other leather goods, fine saddle bags, gun holsters, even ladies' handbags that found a market among the wealthier women in the mining towns. What had started as a desperate attempt to earn pennies for survival had become a profitable enterprise that contributed significantly to the ranch's success. Jamie grew into a sturdy toddler and then a curious little boy, following his father around the ranch and helping his mother in her workshop. He had Katherine's determination and Lucas's steady temperament, a good combination that promised well for his future. When Jamie was 4, Katherine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. She was smaller and more delicate than Jamie had been, with her mother's brown hair and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Lucas proved just as devoted to his daughter as his son, carrying her around the ranch and teaching her to be gentle with the animals. 2 years later came another son, Robert, who was barely a month old when Lucas came home with unexpected news. "The owner is selling the main ranch," he said, his expression thoughtful. "He is asking a fair price, and with the savings we have built up, we could probably manage it if we took on partners." Katherine looked up from nursing Robert, considering the implications. "How much land?" 300 acres with water rights. "Buildings are in good condition, and there is a large herd already established. With our property, we would control nearly 400 acres total. It would make us one of the larger operations in the area." "That is a big step," Katherine said carefully. "We would be taking on significant debt." "We would," Lucas agreed. "But it is an opportunity to build something substantial, something we could pass on to our children." They discussed it long into the night, weighing risks against potential rewards. In the end, Katherine's characteristic boldness won out. "We have never been afraid of hard work," she said. "And we have always succeeded when we work together. Let us take the chance." They bought the main ranch in partnership with 2 other families, hardworking people Lucas had come to trust during his years as foreman. The expanded operation meant even longer hours and more responsibilities, but it also meant financial security and real prosperity. Katherine moved her leather working business to a dedicated building on the main ranch property, a real shop with room for 4 assistants and proper storage for materials. Lucas managed the cattle operation with skill and increasing success, building a reputation for quality stock that attracted buyers from throughout Colorado and neighboring territories. The years passed in a blur of work and family, challenges and triumphs. Katherine and Lucas added 2 more children to their family, twin girls named Elizabeth and Margaret, who arrived when Katherine was 30 and kept the entire household in cheerful chaos. The ranch prospered, their herds growing and their reputation spreading. Katherine's leather business became known throughout the region. Her work featured in a Denver newspaper article about successful women entrepreneurs. Through it all, Katherine and Lucas remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other through difficult times and celebrating victories together. The love that had begun over a saddle built for Pennies had grown into something deep and enduring, tested by the challenges of ranch life and family, and strengthened by every obstacle they overcame together. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas surprised Katherine with a gift. He led her out to the barn at sunset, where a beautiful new saddle sat on display. Katherine recognized the style immediately, her own early work from when she was still learning her craft. "Is this," she began, running her hands over the familiar leather. "The first saddle you ever made," Lucas confirmed. "The one you built for me when you were terrified you would fail. I have kept it all these years, even after I had to retire it from regular use. I had it restored as a reminder of where we started." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I was so scared," she admitted. "Scared I would waste your money, scared I would fail, scared of what it meant that you saw something in me worth seeing." "You were extraordinary then, and you are extraordinary now," Lucas said, pulling her into his arms. "That day I walked into Porter's store, I was just looking for a decent saddle. I found my whole future instead." "We both did," Katherine said, kissing him with all the love and gratitude that filled her heart. They stood in the barn as the sun set over the mountains, holding each other and remembering the journey that had brought them from a cramped back room in a general store to a thriving ranch and a life filled with love and purpose. Katherine thought about the desperate young woman she had been, stitching saddles for Pennies and convinced she would spend her life alone. She thought about Lucas, walking in with a ruined saddle and enough faith to trust her with something important. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Lucas asked. "For buying that saddle, for staying, for seeing me." Lucas smiled and kissed her forehead. "Best purchase I ever made," he said. "Best decision I ever made. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." "We gave each other that," Katherine corrected. The years continued their steady march. The children grew, Jamie becoming a skilled rancher who worked alongside his father, Sarah developing an unexpected talent for business that she applied to the ranch's finances, Robert showing an interest in his mother's leatherwork and eventually taking over the shop. The twins were still young, but already showing their own distinct personalities and interests. Katherine watched her children growing and thriving and felt a deep satisfaction. They would never know the desperate poverty she had endured, the fear of not having enough to eat or losing the roof over their head. They would grow up with opportunity and security, built on the foundation she and Lucas had established through hard work and determination. The ranch expanded gradually over the years, absorbing neighboring properties as they became available. By the time Katherine turned 40, they owned over 1,000 acres and ran several hundred head of cattle. The leather goods shop employed a dozen workers and shipped products throughout the Western territories. What had begun with pennies earned from saddle repairs had grown into a substantial family enterprise. Lucas aged well, his dark hair silvering at the temples but his strength undiminished by the passing years. He and Katherine still rode together sometimes, checking fence lines or moving cattle, working side by side as they had from the beginning. Those moments, just the two of them on horseback under endless sky, remained Katherine's favorites. It was where she felt most connected to him, where the years fell away and she could remember the younger versions of themselves who had taken such an enormous chance on love. One spring afternoon, when Katherine was 45 and Lucas was 47, they rode up to the hill overlooking their original small ranch, the place where they had stood nearly 20 years earlier, and decided to bet everything on their future together. The cabin had been expanded and improved over the years, currently housing one of their ranch hands and his family. But the bones of it remained the same, the place where they had built their life together. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked, sitting easily in the saddle Lucas had commissioned from her years ago, a beautiful piece that had aged into soft perfection. Giving up the freedom of drifting from job to job, settling down with a woman who barely knew which end of a cow to approach. Lucas laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "You knew exactly which end of a cow to approach. You were just smart enough not to get too close to either end." He reached over and took her hand, their horses standing peacefully side by side. "I have never regretted a single moment. You gave me everything I dreamed of and so much more I never knew to hope for. A home, a family, a partnership that makes every day better." "How could I regret that?" Katherine squeezed his hand, looking out over the land they had built together. "I used to think I would spend my life alone," she said quietly. "Working for pennies, surviving but never really living. Then you walked in with that ruined saddle and everything changed." "Best saddle that ever fell apart," Lucas said. "Led me straight to you." "Led us to each other," Katherine corrected, as she always did. They sat in companionable silence as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The cattle grazed peacefully in the valley below, the ranch building stood solid and well-maintained, and somewhere in the distance they could hear their children's voices calling to each other as they worked. "We did good, didn't we?" Lucas said softly. Katherine looked at the life they had built, thought about the love that had sustained them through challenges and blessed them with joy. She thought about the young woman stitching saddles for pennies, never dreaming that happiness and love could be within her reach. She thought about the cowboy who had seen her worth when she barely believed in it herself. "We did very good," she agreed. "We built something real and lasting, just like you promised we could." Lucas leaned over and kissed her, tender and sweet despite the years. "I love you, Katherine Harper." "I love you too, Lucas Harper. Forever." They rode back to the main ranch house as twilight gathered, their horses walking close enough that their legs occasionally brushed together. Katherine thought about the saddle she had built all those years ago, the piece of work that had brought Lucas into her life and changed everything. It hung now in their home, a reminder of beginnings and chances taken, of the moment when everything shifted from merely surviving to truly living. That night, lying in bed with Lucas's arms around her, and the sounds of their family settled around them, Katherine felt a deep and abiding contentment. The path from that cramped back room to this comfortable ranch house had been long and sometimes difficult, filled with challenges she had met with determination and Lucas's unwavering support. But every struggle had been worth it for this moment, this life, this love. The years continued to pass gently. Jamie married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and soon Katherine and Lucas became grandparents to a sturdy boy they named Lucas after his grandfather. Sarah married a banker from Montrose and moved to town but visited often with her own growing family. Robert took over the leather business completely, bringing his own innovations and ideas while maintaining the quality standards his mother had established. The twins grew into capable young women, Elizabeth showing talent for ranch management and Margaret heading off to Denver for schooling. Katherine and Lucas gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch and business, trusting their children and employees to manage what they had built. They spent more time together, taking trips to visit family and friends, working on small projects around the ranch, and simply enjoying each other's company after decades of hard work. On their 30th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the main ranch house for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the rooms with noise and laughter. 3 generations of Harpers coming together to celebrate the couple who had started it all. Katherine stood in the middle of the chaos, watching Lucas hold their newest grandchild while Jamie's oldest boy tugged on his grandfather's sleeve demanding a story, and felt her heart overflow with love and gratitude. That evening, after the guests had left and the house had quieted, Katherine and Lucas sat on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The night was warm for early June, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. 30 years, Lucas said, his arm around Katherine's shoulders. 3 decades since I walked into Porter's store looking for a saddle. And stayed forever, Katherine finished, the words familiar and beloved. No regrets. Lucas asked, as he did every few years, always wanting to make sure she remained happy with the choice they had made. Katherine leaned into his warmth, thinking about the incredible journey from desperate poverty to comfortable prosperity, from lonely survival to a life rich with love and family. Not a single one, she said firmly. You gave me everything I never let myself dream about. Love, partnership, security, family. All of it grew from that first saddle. You gave me those things too, Lucas reminded her. I was drifting before I found you, moving from job to job with no real purpose beyond the next paycheck. You gave me a reason to settle down, to build something lasting. You made me want to be better, to create a legacy worth passing on. We did it together, Katherine said, as she always did. Every step of the way, we were partners. Lucas kissed the top of her head. Best partnership I ever entered into. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply overhead. Katherine thought about all the young women out there who might be where she had been, struggling to survive, convinced they were alone and would remain so. She wished she could tell them all that sometimes life surprised you, that love could come from unexpected places, that taking a chance on something frightening could lead to everything you never knew you needed. What are you thinking about? Lucas asked, reading her contemplative mood. About how grateful I am, Katherine said simply. For you, for our family, for this life we built, and about how it all started because you needed a saddle and I needed hope. We both needed what the other could provide, Lucas said. Me needing quality work, you needing someone who saw your worth. Perfect timing. Perfect timing, Katherine agreed. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together, and felt the same spark of connection she had experienced that first day in Porter's store, when this cowboy had looked at her and seen something worth believing in. The ranch thrived through the following years, adapting to changes in the cattle industry and expanding into new areas. The leather goods business evolved with changing fashions and demands, but maintained its reputation for quality. Most importantly, the family remained close, bound together by the example of love and partnership Katherine and Lucas had modeled from the beginning. As they moved into their later years, Katherine and Lucas spent more time simply being together, talking about the past and enjoying the present. They took regular rides around the property, no longer working but simply appreciating the land they had built their lives on. They attended church on Sundays and hosted regular family dinners where the house filled with children and grandchildren and laughter. On a warm afternoon in late summer, when Katherine was 58 and Lucas was 60, they rode up to their favorite spot overlooking the valley. The ride was shorter than it used to be, their horses moving at a gentler pace, but the destination remained the same. They sat their horses side by side, looking out over decades of work and love made manifest in thriving land and prosperous buildings. "You remember what you said the day we bought this place?" Lucas asked, his voice still strong despite the years. "I said we could build something that was truly ours," Katherine replied, the memory clear despite the passage of time. "We did that," Lucas said with satisfaction. "We built something that will outlast us, something our children and grandchildren will inherit and carry forward." Katherine nodded, feeling the truth of it in her bones. "All because you needed a saddle. All because you had the courage to try something you had never done before," Lucas corrected. "You could have turned me away, told me to go to Montrose. But you took the risk, and everything else followed from that choice." "We both took risks," Katherine said. "You risked your money on someone inexperienced. I risked my heart on someone I barely knew. We both bet everything on hope and possibility." "Best bet I ever made," Lucas said, echoing words he had spoken countless times over the years. They rode back to the ranch house as the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. That evening, surrounded by family at the dinner table, Katherine looked around at the life they had created and felt a profound sense of completion. She had started with nothing but skill, with a needle and determination not to give up. She had built a business, a family, a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. And she had done it all with Lucas beside her, partners in every sense of the word. The years continued their gentle march. Katherine's business was eventually taken over completely by Robert and his wife, who expanded it in new directions while maintaining the quality standards Katherine had established. Lucas handed off more of the ranch management to Jamie and Elizabeth, both of whom had proven themselves capable stewards of the land. Katherine and Lucas settled into a comfortable semi-retirement, helping where they were needed but mostly enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. They celebrated their 40th anniversary with a huge gathering, the ranch house and yard filled with family and friends from throughout the region. Someone brought out the original saddle Katherine had made for Lucas, carefully preserved all these years, and told the story of how a cowboy buying a saddle had led to everything else. The younger generation listened with fascination, asking questions about those early days, about the courage it took to start from nothing and build something lasting. Katherine, her hair now silver but her eyes still bright, told them about stitching saddles for Pennies, about the fear and desperation that had defined her life before Lucas. She told them about the day he walked in with his ruined equipment and enough faith to trust her with an important job. And she told them about choosing love and partnership over safety, about taking the risk that had changed everything. "The lesson," she said to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren who crowded around, "is that sometimes the most important things come from unexpected places." "I thought I would spend my life alone, working for scraps. Lucas thought he was just buying a saddle. Neither of us knew we were finding our future, but we were brave enough to take the chance when it appeared, and that made all the difference." Lucas, sitting beside her and holding her hand as he had for 4 decades, added his own wisdom. "Life is unpredictable and often hard, but the right partner makes all the difference. Find someone who sees you, who respects your strength, who wants to build something together rather than control you. That is what your grandmother and I have had, and it is the greatest blessing of my life." As the celebration continued around them, Katherine and Lucas slipped away to their porch, seeking a moment of quiet together. They sat in their familiar spot, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, their hands clasped together. 40 years, Katherine whispered, still amazed by the passage of time. 40 years of waking up beside you, Lucas said. 40 years of partnership and love. Not enough. I want 40 more. So do I, Katherine said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Though I think we will have to settle for however long we are blessed with. However long it is, it will be spent loving you, Lucas promised. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the sounds of their family and the ranch that represented their life's work. Katherine thought about the girl she had been, alone and scared, stitching leather for pennies, and convinced she had no future beyond survival. She thought about the woman she had become, loved and respected, successful and secure, surrounded by family and legacy. The journey between those two versions of herself had been long and sometimes difficult, but she would not change a single moment of it. "Thank you," she said softly to Lucas, "for everything, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for believing in me when I barely believed in myself, for staying." "Thank you for being worth staying for," Lucas replied, "for being exactly the partner I needed, for building this life with me." "We built it together," Katherine said, as she always did, "always together." The years flowed on, gentle and sweet. Katherine and Lucas both remained healthy and active well into their 70s, still taking daily walks around the property, still attending every family gathering, still demonstrating the partnership and love that had become legendary among their children and grandchildren. They had become the heart of a sprawling family tree, the foundation upon which 3 generations had built their lives. When Katherine was 75 and Lucas was 77, they decided to take one more ride to their favorite overlook. It was spring, the mountains green and beautiful, wildflowers painting the meadows in brilliant colors. They rode slowly, their horses picking careful paths, in no hurry to arrive or depart. At the top of the hill, they dismounted with the help of walking sticks and stood together looking out over the land that had been their life's work. The ranch sprawled below them, prosperous and well-maintained, a testament to decades of hard work and careful management. In the distance, they could see family members going about the day's work, the newest generation learning the same lessons of determination and partnership that Katherine and Lucas had modeled. "We did good," Lucas said, his voice still strong despite his years. "We did very good," Katherine agreed, taking his hand. Their fingers, gnarled now with age and arthritis, still fit together perfectly. "I have loved every moment with you," Lucas said, turning to face her. "From that first day in Porter's store until now. Every single moment, even the hard ones, was better because we faced them together." Katherine felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sadness but from overwhelming gratitude. "You gave me a life I never dreamed was possible. Love, family, security, purpose. All of it came from that first saddle, from you having faith in me." "We gave each other everything," Lucas corrected gently. "You gave me just as much as I gave you. We built this together, Katherine. Every step of the way we were partners." She stepped into his arms, and they held each other as they had countless times over the decades, still finding comfort and joy in each other's presence. The love that had begun over a saddle had deepened and matured into something that transcended the physical, something that lived in their bones and hearts and souls. "I love you, Lucas Harper," Katherine whispered. "Today, tomorrow, forever." "I love you too, Katherine Harper," Lucas replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The best choice I ever made was walking into that store and buying a saddle from a scared young woman who did not know how remarkable she was. "And the best choice I ever made was saying yes to everything you offered," Katherine said. "To the commission, to the courtship, to the marriage, to this life. All of it. I would do it all again exactly the same way." They stood together on the hill as the sun climbed higher. Two people who had started from nothing and built everything, who had taken chances on each other when the logical choice would have been to play it safe. They had worked hard, loved deeply, and created a legacy that would continue for generations. Eventually, they remounted their horses and rode back to the main house, where family waited and life continued its beautiful, ordinary march. They had their evening meal surrounded by children and grandchildren, told stories about the old days, and laughed at the antics of the youngest members of the family. And that night, lying in bed in the room they had shared for over 50 years, Katherine and Lucas held each other close and felt the profound peace of a life well lived and love well shared. Katherine Harper passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79, surrounded by her family and holding Lucas's hand. Lucas followed her barely 8 months later, his family reporting that he simply seemed to lose his will to keep going without his partner of 56 years by his side. They were buried together in the family plot on the ranch, beneath a simple headstone that bore both their names and a single line. "She stitched saddles for Pennies. He bought one and stayed forever." The ranch and the leather goods business continued to thrive under the management of their children and grandchildren, a testament to the strong foundation Katherine and Lucas had built. But more than the physical legacy, they left behind the example of their love and partnership, a model of what marriage could be when two people committed to building something together with mutual respect and unwavering support. Decades after their deaths, a great-granddaughter writing a family history would interview the oldest living relatives, gathering stories about the couple who had started it all. And in those stories, told with love and admiration, Katherine and Lucas lived on. The desperate young woman stitching leather for Pennies and the cowboy who saw her worth, who took a chance on love and never regretted it for a single moment. Their love story, which began over a saddle in a cramped back room, had grown into something that shaped generations and proved that the most important things in life often came from unexpected places, requiring only courage and hope and the willingness to take a chance on something beautiful.